Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Qwynn Galloway-Salazar, and I am so thrilled. I'm so excited to have alongside of me today, Deborah Grassman. We are going to give folks a minute or two to jump on in, but we are going to get this party started soon because we've got so much to talk about today. If you have any challenges, any questions, please feel free to drop those comments or questions into the chat. We have someone, Emma is on board with us from Psych Armor, who is answering all questions, all logistical challenges in the chat, just so that Deborah and I can focus on our conversation and not try to multitask. So thank you, everyone, once again. We're letting folks join in. We are pushing, Deborah, we're pushing these numbers. We're at 91 already. And I was just like, how many folks are coming on? But I see folks are coming on because they know how powerful this work is. Um, can everyone hear me? Deborah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right. Excited, excited. Awesome. So what I will say is for those who are dropping in the chat that they cannot hear us, I'm going to ask you to make sure on your end, your settings are configured. It looks like folks can hear us. There we go. Okay. All right, Deborah. I think we should just get this party started. Um,
Let's go.
let's do it. So if you joined us on our last community of practice, session number 1, I had with me Dr. Heidi Kraft, and Heidi and I talked specifically about the 15 things veterans want you to know. And that's the model that the majority of level 5 hospice organizations use to train their staff, to train their volunteers. But once we finish that session, and I'll be quite honest with you, if you have been following any of my work for a bit of time, I always say there is no way that I could be able to touch the end of life space without the one and only Deborah Grassman. So it only made perfect sense to wind up this community of practice series with my Shiro as I am getting goosebumps to pay homage, honor your legacy, and really come alongside of us and let's talk about what we can reimagine together in what end of life care should and could look like for veterans. So with that, I have to read your bio, Deborah. I can't just scan and just give clips. I have to read it. So for
Well,
those of
make
you,
it short. Don't spend too much time on me. We've got too much else to talk
all
about.
right, let's do this. Deborah Grassman is the author of 3 books, Peace at Last, The Hero Within, and Soul Injury. She is a contributing author for 4 textbooks and has published 25 articles. There are 4 documentary films and a TED Talk that feature her work. However, none of these achievements have taught her as much as the 10,000, I'm going to say that again, 10,000 dying veterans she has taken care of as a VA hospice nurse practitioner for 30 years. The lessons Deborah has learned has culminated into this concept known as soul injury. And we're going to dig into that today. A wound that separates a person from their own sense of self. With all of this wisdom for over 30 years, Deborah can help anyone recover their loss of self-worth by healing the relationship that they have with themselves. Deborah, it is true honor to have you join us today.
Well, it is a blessing and an honor to be with you, Dr. Q, and to be with all of you out there that are watching this and wanting to serve veterans. It's certainly a passion for Dr. Qwynn, myself, and Psych Armor. And so thank you all for joining us in that passion.
Absolutely. right on. We know that approximately, I think, a little bit more than 60,000 veterans die a year. And this is a conversation that I think you and I have been wanting the nation to really spotlight, to have a more thorough conversation of what does understanding the unique experiences of those that have served and how those unique experiences impact the end of life. I think both of us have this agreement that as a nation, we have got to do more than saying thank you for your service. We need to put some action behind that. So I want you to dig in with me and tell me, Deborah, you've been doing this work for decades. When you hear someone say thank you for your service as it relates to an aging veteran or a veteran in hospice or palliative care, historically, what has that looked?
Well, you're frozen a little bit. Am I frozen?
No.
No. I'm okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, it's certainly, I've seen an evolution both as a nation and as a community, and also as an individual watching. I grew up in the Vietnam era, and post-Vietnam, there were no thank yous at all. Pretty much. In fact, there was just the opposite. And that's a whole nother story for our Vietnam vets. But at any rate, and then it has grown in more recent decades to be thank you. And thank goodness, I am thrilled that that has happened. And I know I indoctrinated that into my practice. What I have seen and where I think now, and it's a maturation of this evolution, is that the thank you can't be rote. And I see an awful lot of just rote, thank you for serving our country. Thank you for your sacrifice. And not that that's not important. I don't want anybody to misinterpret that. But when we started the We Honor Veterans program many years ago now, maybe up to 20 years ago now, the intention was that the thank you just be a vehicle to achieve the goal of allowing people to lay their burdens down, to uncover the untold stories. And many hospices have done that. And many other hospices have just stopped at the We Honor Veterans. Oh, we say thank you. Oh, we tell you what heroes you are. And again, I'm going to say that that's important, but should just be the start. The goal is to allow them to lay these burdens down. So I think that that's the gap that we still have to kind of recover. We were doing that quite well, I think. It's kind of fallen off for different reasons now. And so that would be my hope and my legacy that I hope that we can bring, is to help people understand that, the question I always ask to open up the door when I would be with a dying veteran is I would just simply say, is there anything that might still be troubling you now from your military service? And then just sit there quietly. We spend too much time asking questions that don't matter. Oh, what branch did you serve in? Oh, when did you serve? Oh, but so we can get all those boxes checked. And the real question that we want to be asking is there anything that's going to complicate your peaceful dying? Because we want them to have a peaceful death. And we know that some of these memories can surface unbidden at the end of life. And if they do, they can cause agitation. And Qwynn, I can tell you there is nothing worse than an agitated death. It's worse than physical pain is when there is agitation. And if we don't know how to be able to help them, because I can tell you, Ativan is not going to cause an agitated veteran to be able to lay their burdens down. So at any rate, as you said, veterans sometimes have a unique experience of death. And what I just described is one of those unique experiences. And too often, we focus on calling them heroes, and they are. Don't misunderstand what I'm going to say, but I can also tell you that at the end of life, sometimes what surfaces, because we all have a coward inside of us. We all have a hero inside of us. I even wrote a book called The Hero Within. And we also have a coward. All of us have a coward inside of us. And you want to know what sometimes surfaces with some veterans at the end of life?
Mm.
It's when they tell me something like what they did that 50 years later, that it was an act of cowardice that they still hold on to and feel ashamed about. That's what can complicate. So you asked me about, we were talking about the evolution. In my own practice, I used to thank all veterans, and I got pretty good at it. I had an agenda. I'm here, I'm going to thank you. Whether you want to be
Yeah.
thanked or not, you're going to get a thank you. That was my agenda. And I'll tell you, I still remember the veteran that changed that for me. I thanked him, and he said to me, here he is on our hospice unit. He says to me,
Mm.
if you knew what I did, you wouldn't thank me. That stopped me in my tracks. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It stopped me, and I sat down on his bed, and I said nothing. I just held my heart, and he told me what he did. It was the first time he had ever told anyone. And I saw something in his eyes after he told me that was not there before he told me that. And it was just a glimmer of peace.
Mm.
Just a glimmer, just a glimmer. But I saw that peace expand a little bit over the days ahead before he died. But that's what changed my practice. So our job is to create a safe emotional space so that whatever is there for them, whatever it is, can come forth, that they can feel safe. And if we are only, when they try to tell us about a regret they had, something they did wrong, a time when they were a coward, whatever it might be, and we try to reframe that into, oh, you were only doing what you were ordered to do. Oh, you were, in a kill or be killed situation. Of course you had to do that. All those things are true.
Yes,
And it doesn't change what their experience was. And that their experience, if believe me, they've been told those kinds of things for 50 years, and if it's still 50 years later, then let's pay attention to it. Let's listen to it. I also, there's a famous saying that everybody in the military knows, and it's um, a lot of times veterans would tell me, oh, that they did nothing. They were just a cook on the they weren't on the front lines, that was nothing, all those kinds of things. But there's this famous saying that says, some gave all, and all gave some.
absolutely.
See, and and I think that's a lot of times what veterans were trying to tell me was, some gave all, and then they feel guilty. I didn't give all. I'm still alive. The ones you should be thanking, are buried. Those are the ones that we should be thanking. But then when I could say, you're right, and some all gave some, tell me about the some that you gave.
Yeah. Yeah. You
You
know,
see,
Deborah, I love that. And I want to pause for a moment and go back in terms of why we even have these communities of practice, right? They're conversations where those who are joining us can take snippets and put it to practice. One thing that I've always said as an end of life doula is put your clipboard down for a moment and meet that veteran right where they are. And I'm going to pose the question again for anyone who wasn't able to jot it down when you shared it. Is there anything that might still be troubling you now? You want to go in with an open-ended question because that open-ended question leaves room for so much rapport building, trust, passing muster for those of you who have been in the middle, you got to pass muster. And it offers that veteran that you're sitting alongside and even their caregiver or family member the opportunity to tell those untold stories that may have been burdening them for decades. And I'm with you, Deborah. One of my very first opportunities to work in hospice as a volunteer, I was working with a Vietnam veteran. And I'll never forget, he asked me this question: why do you want to be my friend? And similar enough, in the same vein, it was, you don't know what I did over there. And I cannot, for years, I held that. And I've said, from Vietnam to Korea to Gulf to Iraq and Afghanistan to the war that's happening now, how many of our veterans are carrying, why does someone want to hear my story? Right? Looking at it from the standpoint.
So the question we have to really, each of us, I would invite all the 133 people,
Yes.
ask yourself this question right now, right this minute. Do you really
Mm.
want to hear an ugly story?
Yeah.
Are you prepared to hear the ugly story? What do you need to do to hear the ugly story that might be lurking inside, waiting for light, held in darkness, waiting for someone to be a beacon, a safety beacon, to say, I can hold it with you without judgment. And really, we all have resistance to that. And the key is bringing consciousness to our resistance. So really don't sit there and think, oh, yeah, I can hear anything. Because I can tell you, I worked for the VA for 30 years. I didn't let any ugly stories in for 10 years. I'm telling you, for 10 years, I didn't want to hear it. I'd reframe it. Oh, yes, but, then it took me about 10 more years to start learning how to unlearn what I thought, I had to start, my unbecoming before I could become
Mm-hmm.
a safe harbor to hold these stories. And I can tell you, when these stories would come, sometimes there would be, a little spouse at the bedside or adult children, and they'd go, oh my God, I never knew this. He's never said this.
Hmm.
I didn't know. But see,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
also, dying people are fertile ground for healing. That, for all of us, our conscious mind gets weaker and our unconscious mind gets stronger. And so therefore that resistance of the conscious mind that keeps that, tamped down, naturally starts easing off as the veil between consciousness and unconsciousness starts lifting. And that's what happens during that twilight time prior to death. So it's a natural opportunity. So we are missing an opportunity if we don't know how to do that. And isn't it delightful that it is hospice? We're the ones that get to witness this time between life and death. We're the ones
Yes.
that this space that is there is not available to practitioners earlier on in a person's lifetime, but it's available to us. And that's why we have to know that this time is different. We have to know that it is a more unique, as you said, experience that we can't betray. And if we don't know how to create those safe environments, if we don't know how to invite those stories, then we are betraying them. We are abandoning them. So you don't want to push them to tell their stories. We do damage if we do that. And we also do damage if we don't know how to create that safe place for those stories.
Absolutely. So stories, untold stories matter. Another tidbit, as a doula, we talk about, there's acronyms for everything. Once again, with the military, we use an acronym for it all. I want you to remember this: rugs, regrets, unfinished business, guilt, shame, and I added an F, forgiveness. Those are some of the most powerful elements of stories. We want to make sure, if our veteran wants to let those out, we are those containers to be present for it. So
Well, that is beautifully said. And, I want to say that think about it. I love that you brought up, you added the S, because I want you to think about many veterans have a lot to forgive. They have to forgive themselves for having killed other people, if that's the case. They have to forgive themselves for not killing, or maybe for not dying, or if they committed friendly fire, so to speak. That's a different layer of guilt yet. They have to forgive the enemy. They have to forgive, if they're a Vietnam vet, they have to forgive the government for using and betraying them. They have to forgive the world for being like it is with war in it. And they have to forgive God for allowing the world to be like it is with war in it. That's a lot to forgive. That's a lot of work. And you don't just say, oh, let it go, just forgive and let it. Yeah, yeah. All of those dimensions have different penetrations into our soul. Our soul holds it for us, and it just waits for the conscious mind to acknowledge it, bring it out of the dark, and lift it up so it can be released.
absolutely. So I see the questions coming in terms of what's the acronym RUGS again. It's regrets, unfinished business, guilt, shame, and forgiveness.
That's a recipe for bringing peace. We have to bring peace. Dying people have to bring peace with their past. There's the regrets.
Yeah.
They're dying. They've been given a terminal diagnosis. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in hospice. They have to, come to peace with that. And then they have to make peace with their future and having those discussions of what dropping off their body means and what that's going to be like for them and their family members. That it's not easy. And, it's a hard job that hospice workers and doulas have.
Absolutely. And it's a job that I love the fact that we are entering this space where we are reimagining together, hospice and doulas coming together to say, what can we do for peace together? Now, Deborah, you have been doing this for over 30 years. I'm not aging you, my friend. By no
It's
means am I
okay.
aging you.
I'm old. I am entering my elder years and I am proud of it.
But you
My
have this.
veterans have taught me how to die, Qwynn. They've taught me how to die. I'm ready for it any day.
What a mm, what a gift.
It is. It
I
is.
I hear so many of our elders in this work who say, I now know how to live because I've sat with the dying and they've taught me how to live, how to love, and how to die. It gets no better than that,
It
right?
doesn't.
Now that's the
That
recipe.
it's a recipe. The facade crumbles whether we want it to or not as people come to the end of their life. And man, I was just soaking up their lessons.
Lessons. So let's talk about these lessons. Over 30 years, you have come up with this masterpiece of a framework tying in soul injury. Many of
Mm.
us who are in this space, we have heard of moral injury, post-traumatic stress, or for some people who still use the term post-traumatic stress disorder or invisible wounds. Talk to us about what soul injury is.
Yes. Well, at the start of my 30-year career, I definitely, PTSD was becoming more and more prominent, and I was learning about it. When I got my master's degree, I even did a whole um, class about it. So, that really helped me understand better because honestly, I won't go into the story, but I honestly came into caring for veterans with a prejudice against people with PTSD. I just thought, yeah, that war was over 10 years ago. Let's just get over it, get on with it. What's with all the long hair and tattoos? At any rate, I had something that totally transformed that attitude and showed me my attitude, but I won't go into that story right now. But at any rate, that definitely opened my eyes, opened my heart so I could see what veterans saw. And then, then the term moral injury came along. And by that time, I was doing hospice work and I was thrilled with that because oftentimes I was seeing these moral injuries surface at the end of life. And so, the Department of Defense and they define moral injury as a violation of your morals and values and beliefs and what have you. And I definitely saw that. So that was great. So, at any rate, Then as I kept going along, and now I'm doing intense inpatient hospice work, and an inpatient unit, honestly, Qwynn, is like a learning lab. Because I mean, we would have 10 patients, all of them in this kind of the same end of life and stage, and they were all veterans. So I mean, this is a community hospice where 20% are veterans. No, these are 100% veterans. So I mean, it was really a learning lab for me. And so I would talk to patients about PTSD and about moral, and those types of things would come up. But I started hearing more and more the veterans would say something else. Yeah, I have problems with PTSD, but I can learned how to manage that. And moral injury, yeah, this and that. And I've learned how to, I've come to peace with that and what have you. But I'm talking about what the PTSD did to me. I'm talking about what the moral injury did to me. I lost who I was. I lost my sense of self. And so then I'd start asking, I said, well, what do you call that? And different ones would say, I lost my soul. It's a soul injury. And nobody talks about the soul injury, the loss of identity. I didn't pay too much attention to it at first. It came up here and there. I kept hearing it more and more, this loss of identity, this loss of self. And that's different than moral. A moral injury might cause you to lose yourself. PTSD and that amygdala it can cause you to lose yourself. But what I started seeing really was, lots of, marginalized populations who get, a loss of self. Anytime, a child who, anytime you feel ashamed about who you are and you try to cover it up and you disconnect from your sense of, you develop a sense of self. Sometimes I won't tell you my own soul injury story of being of my little lassie story. Something that happened, a decision I made at age 5 to never cry again because someone laughed at my tears and I didn't. And, I totally disconnected from the part of Deborah that feels sad. I just had to have this facade and make everybody happy all the time. That was a soul injury, and I always feel almost embarrassed to even tell that story when I tell it in depth because it's so trivial compared to what my combat veterans have been through. And yet still arrive at the same lifeless place of not knowing who I am. And you can arrive there in a lot of different ways, but most people have a soul injury. And so that's really what caused me to start thinking about this overlooked, unidentified. It's almost like the elephant in the middle of the room. Why do we not have a name for this? Why do we, and if we can identify it, then maybe we can do something about it. Maybe we can have a conversation about it. And, too often we shove shame into the corner and, well, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to keep that secret. I'm not going to bring that out into the light. But, psychologists would say, oh, no, it's just the opposite. You want to bring the shame out. Let's take a look at it, bring it out of the dark. See, it's the shame. So we found that there were 3 causes to the soul injury. Now, this has taken years, and we've researched this now. It's been published in referee journals and all. So 3 causes: unmourned loss and hurt, unforgiven guilt or shame, and fear of helplessness and loss of control. Those are the 3 causes of soul injury that causes us to erect stoic walls, certain facades. And I'm not saying facades is important. Facades are very important in untrustworthy environments, Mm-hmm. But the problem becomes when we think that we are the facade. Yeah. So what we want to do, we want to have facades in untrustworthy environments. We want to erect them, but we want to be conscious of that. We want to bring consciousness to the facade so that we can appropriately use it. Because the inappropriate use, the toxic use, is when we use it, when we think that's who we are, and it separates us from who we really are. Absolutely. And that's when people come to the end of their life and they start telling you their regrets, and that facade comes down and they go, oh my gosh, I have lived a counterfeit life. I have lived a life that everybody else wanted for me. But back when I was a kid, I knew I should have been a blah, 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 whatever it was. And I I didn't have the courage to follow that dream. Instead, I let everybody else. It's those kinds of things. It's not too late to recover our lives. And I have been with many people that, on their deathbed, they realize that they bring consciousness to it. And I say, yeah, it's not too, just having the realization that it was counterfeit and it wasn't you. That awareness enough is a light bulb breakthrough. That's real. You got the
Absolutely.
lesson. You're leaving this earth with that lesson. What if you would have left the earth thinking you still were the facade?
So, Deborah, so folks want to get the lesson again. So I'm getting the messages that can you repeat the 3 phases
Yeah,
one more time?
of course. Unmourned, that being the operative word, loss and hurt. Loss and hurt is part of life. It just is. We can pretend we want to be happy all the time. We only want to validate and positive think the other way. But we have, to have the full life experience, it's to experience all of it, including the ugly, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. It's all there. So it's the unmourned loss that causes us to get separated. It's stuck. And there is a part in our unconscious, in our soul, that's willing, it's not afraid of loss and hurt. Our soul is not afraid of loss and hurt, Qwynn. So it will hold the loss and the hurt for us very graciously until we're ready, till our conscious mind is ready to acknowledge it, re-own it, rehome it. In other words, create a safe place for it to come back home to be a part of us. We are already whole inside. We have these scattered pieces of self out in unconsciousness, but our wholeness is all we have to do is reclaim it, get real with it, and say, okay, I'm not ashamed of you anymore. Come back home. Let's have a talk. Let's talk. So unmourned loss is number one. Unforgiven guilt and shame. Don't ever tell someone, oh, you shouldn't feel ashamed about that. You were doing the best you could at the time with whatever it is, even though all those things are true. The shame is there. All you've just done is say, no, run away. What you're feeling, you're not feeling. You shouldn't feel what you are feeling. No, let's have a discussion about it. See what you can discover. I'm not here to tell you you should or shouldn't. Your soul is like the North Star, like it'll guide you back, but you have to listen to it. So unforgiven guilt and shame, and fear of helplessness and loss of control. And this last one is something that no one talks about. I'm telling you, at the heart, and it used to be in the DSM, it used to be part of the criteria for even making the diagnosis of PTSD, was helplessness. When you are traumatized, if you look back at the actual event that was the traumatic event, the person feels out of control and traumatized, out of control and helpless, rather. And what are they going to do after the trauma is over? And they're going to say, well, I'm never going to feel that again. So they will become very overly controlling. Understandably, I don't want to feel that helpless ever again. Now,
Yeah.
fast forward a few decades. Now they're on a hospice unit. Guess what happens? They start feeling helpless, right? I mean, you lose your independence, you're losing your health, you're losing your life. I mean, my gosh, you're becoming very, very, and they will fight it to the very end, be angry at the helplessness. And when veterans would come to my hospice unit, I would just I'd go in to welcome them to the unit and what have you. And as I would sit there, I would always bring up the word helpless. I would say, I can't imagine how helpless you might be feeling right now. And do you know what they would do?
Cry.
Shake their
For some, and Nadine, that's a golden nugget. That's a golden nugget. You gave word. You gave a word to some of them who may not have known how to express what they were feeling. Saying the word helplessness to a culture, to someone that's indoctrinated into a culture where stoicism is such a thing, And just saying helplessness and pausing and giving that room silence for that weight to be there, but for that vulnerability to show
Yes.
up is medicine.
Well, you think about it, they have been trained to protect. They, I mean, it's not just in the military. They leave the military to protect their family, to protect their. I mean, and thank God, we need protectors. But at the end of life, it starts getting in their way and then they start feeling angry that they feel so helpless. They feel like they're letting others down because they can't protect it. I mean, all of those factors. And when you can normalize it a bit and just say, yeah. So, at any rate, I'm telling you, it will change your practice. If it's one nugget that will change your practice, I start using when I went to nursing school, we were taught give patients control, teach more control, because they're losing control. So therefore, and again, don't misunderstand me. You definitely want to give people choices and as much control as possible. But there are certain situations, a lot of situations where they no longer have control. And if you keep trying to some that they do,
Yeah.
you're just conspiring with denial and the problem instead of helping them come to peace with, yes, you can't control everything. There are some things in which you have no control. And if you keep trying to control something you cannot control, it's going to cause you frustration and conflict. But guess what? You can take pain, emotional pain I'm talking about, and peace and actually bring them together. And when you can do it without fear, when you can release the fear of the helplessness, see, it's not the helplessness that's the problem. The operative word is fear. The fear of helplessness is causing you more problem because that's what makes you shut down. That's what makes you withdraw, and that's what's interfering right now, making you so mad at yourself and at the environment and you're mad at your body and all this. But, let's talk about how to come peace with what's real. And what's real is, yeah, it sucks to lose your independence, you know.
Absolutely. I saw a question, so two questions, and I love this because now the audience, they're leading the way. We talked, for those of you all who are here, we had a run-up show with talking points, and I said, Deborah, this conversation is going to happen organically. We're going to see where it leads us, but the audience is leading the way alongside of us. There was a really good point I saw that regarded the National Guard and the reserves, and how at the end of life, those who served in the National Guard and the reserve, if they did not serve on active duty status, do not see themselves as veterans. And I'm paraphrasing, Craig, I know that came from you, but here's what I want to say with that. As a professional, whether you're in hospice, whether you're in geriatrics, palliative care, the way that you frame your question is what matters most. You see, sometimes I hear folks say, the question we ask is, are you a veteran? And if that's the question your organization is asking, I say this with all the love in my soul, that's the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, have you served in the armed forces? Not even have you served in the US Armed Forces, because you may have folks that are right there receiving care that may have served somewhere else around the world. Ask the question, have you served in the armed forces? You have some women veterans who served in Vietnam that will not respond to you when you ask, are you a veteran? You are missing out, not only on the hardcore quantitative data, but the qualitative. Because what we're starting to recognize now, when we're looking at marginalized populations, we don't know what we don't know. So we have to be clear in how we message the message. Or have you served in the armed forces versus are you a veteran?
Well, you're bringing up a couple of important points. One is women. We bring our assumptions and we forget, and because the majority of people that have served in the military are men, it does cause us to make the assumption that all people. So the woman standing next to you may very well be a veteran. as you are, Dr. Q, and the man standing next to you may very well not be a veteran. So pay attention, bring consciousness, mindfulness to your assumptions. We all have them, and we all have prejudices. And, if you think you have no prejudices, that's the real problem. If you think you make no assumptions, that's the problem, because we all have this human brain that acts as a filter. And the goal is to bring that filter out of the dark into the light so we can see how it is distorting our vision. The other thing that's coming to mind is actually something very personal, because you brought up the National Guard. And some of you have seen my presentations. And if you've ever seen a photo of me in bed with a dying veteran, you may think, oh my God, she's going a little bit too far. That was actually my uncle that I was in bed with, anchoring his heart. And the photo was actually taken the day before he died. The local hospice, this happened up in Indiana, the local hospice came in and they did a veteran service for him. And he was a member of the National Guard. And we had a conversation the week before. He did exactly what you said, Dr. Q. That was nothing. I was just in the National Guard. I didn't really do anything. I never really got called up or anything, and that was true. I said, yeah, your sacrifices were not as much as others who did, but you darn well still had to go away every year, and you still had to be ready, to be willing to be called up, and always have that up there. But definitely I acknowledge that his sacrifice was not as much as others, because that's what he wanted me to really recognize. Here's what I want the other hospices to know: that standing beside me was my brother, who was also there for his uncle's death as well. My brother had served 8 years in the Air Force. And, it would have been great if the hospice people would have turned to these many family members standing around and asked them, is anybody here? I mean, my uncle was really basically unconscious at this point. So, but it would have been nice, and we always did this when we held did these types of programs at our bedside with every single one of our patients. We would ask the other family members, and then we would honor them as well. And so I think that's sometimes we forget to do, that is to pay attention to other people in the room, that we have the opportunity. It's not just about the person. The other thing I think we forget is that family members in the military, and I bet you out of the 138, there are a lot of adults who are listening today that grew up in what they call a military family, and they were military brats, they often call themselves. And we forget that I see them as the unsung heroes, because often they had to move and move and move and move because of, different orders, and, change school. When you're a kid, it is not easy to get uprooted and move and move and move. I only changed grade schools one time where they changed and that was hard. And I'll have people that say, I've changed grade schools 6 times. I'm going, that's hard. See, that's sacrifice, and that's sacrifice we do not. You have a parent that has PTSD, or you have a parent that runs their household like the Marine Corps or something. I've heard all those kinds of stories. That's that's sacrifice too. That's generational sacrifice. If it causes you to lose your identity, if it causes you to feel ashamed of who you are, or why can't I be like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not whatever enoughness is, that's a soul injury. And there's ways that we can recover and reclaim those pieces of self. And it's not by trying to infuse, oh, you're good, you're so good, oh, you're telling all this. No, it's just uncover, get the unmourned loss and hurt, and the unforgiving guilt and shame, and the fear of helplessness and loss of control out of the way. And you know what? You will grow in, you will become. The grace, the motion of your being will come forth on its own. So see, we're approaching a lot of our current psych stuff is more about trying to infuse more positivity. In fact, the psychological literature will call it toxic positivity. And, Viktor Frankl, I always love Viktor Frankl. He called it artificial optimism. And he called that from a German concentration camp. He talked about artificial optimism. And he said the people who only want to live on that end of the spectrum would end up dying of a broken heart. But we who were real, who were able to say, no, we can learn how to navigate the terrors and the tortures. We will get through this. They were the ones that survived, So, any rate, I'm getting off
And
track.
no, you're not. No, you're not. It's that meaning making piece,
It's that
right?
meaning
It's
making.
that meaning making piece. And as we kind of like weave this in, because I'm like, time, we can do this as a whole masterclass and go for a day, quite honestly. But
Well,
as
I
we
tell you, we do have, when you said masterclass, we do have all of this stuff on our masterpiece, electronically courses. We have 3 courses on veterans that
oh,
go through all of this and we have a basic course, we have an advanced course, and we have a course about family members and the way military experiences infiltrate out beyond, ripple out beyond. So yeah, we actually have the courses right online. You can go right to opuspeace.org, go on to all courses. You'll see all the courses on veterans,
and that's
veteran
beautiful.
care.
That is absolutely beautiful because families serve too. And when you think about the life continuum, if you are in the home and you're being raised by a veteran where there is post-traumatic stress or moral injury or soul injury, what do those experience? How does those experience impact you across your life continuum? And when you reach the end of your life, how does that show back up? So when we think about cultural competency and sensitivity and humility as it relates to the military and veteran communities, we definitely have to see the veteran, but also those that have been around them during that lifespan, because they may show signs of trauma and injury as well. And it's tied closely to that military experience. So this is going to be a cycle that we see for generations. I will be honest, this will outlive Deborah and I. And that's why you see Deborah and I coming along together to say, there's going to be a generation after us that's going to pick up the torch and keep this work moving forward, because there will continuously be a need to support veterans, their caregivers, their loved ones, their communities through the end of life. Um, Deborah, I want to, as we say, generations and moving into who's going to take our legacy and take it to the next thing, I want us to jump into reimagining. We want to hear from you, the trailblazer. What do you hope for when you think of the next 10 to 20 years? What do you hope for in end of life care for our military and veteran communities?
Well, I hope the voices of those 10,000 veterans that are on my shoulders here with me in some way this day, that their suffering was not in vain, because they are showing us this idea of soul injury that applies to everybody, military or non-military. And it's a gift to all of us to be able, I think, to be able to uncover a term that allows all of us to come back home to ourselves, because that's what happens at the end of life. And I think these veterans have shown us that. So my hope, my legacy, I'm hoping will be this idea of soul injury. It is why I finally got busy when I hit my 70th birthday, and I said, yeah, if I'm going to write this soul injury book, I better get going. So I'm glad I did achieve that this past year. So I think that's kind of the starting point, to have a very as you said, meaningful. When we start, and we've been doing soul injury communities now, these book communities around the country over this past year. Oh my gosh, Qwynn, what is
Yes.
happening? It's the same thing that I would see, witness at patients at veterans' bedsides, the same things happening as people bring home scattered pieces of themselves. And it's not that, I mean, it's hard work. I don't want to, it is hard work, but it's not filled with a lot of rhetorical psycho stuff. It is just getting real with who we are and doing the mourning and the forgiving and the releasing of the fear of help. Those things you just can't believe what it's happening. You told me you were going to ask me about this the other day. So I found I by happenstance this morning, and I thought I would share with you the letter when I retired. It's been like 10 years ago, whenever it was. And they were having my big retirement party, what have you. And I thought, well, what am I going to say? And what I decided to do is I wrote a letter to those 10,000 veterans to thank them. And I found the letter today. Believe it or not, I was going through, I said, oh, she wants me to. So I thought I'd read you the letter. And I think that may kind of summarize my history and my hope for the future and how the birthing of soul injury came about. So here it is. So I want you to imagine that I'm retiring after 30 years. And this is what I said. This is what I read. Dear veterans, as I approach the end of my life and I reflect back on the many blessings bestowed on me, the most valuable are the lessons that you have taught me about a wound that few people talk about, yet a wound that I have repeatedly witnessed as it surfaces unbidden on your deathbeds. Soul injury, an injury that lurks and haunts and sabotages. And yes, it sometimes agitates, complicating peaceful dying. What you dying veterans revealed to me was the inner terrain of suffering and the inner terrain of the soul. Suffering and soul. My education, the media I watch, the society in which I live, they're all afraid of suffering, and they are afraid of the soul. So I was largely ignorant of the value of the soul or its capacity to hold my suffering. But what you dying traumatized veterans taught me was that I needed to stop being afraid of my suffering. I needed to stop being afraid of my soul, because my soul is vast and strong and capable of carrying my suffering, if I will just learn how to open up to it. Opening up to my suffering has not been an easy lesson for me. You see, I became a VA nurse because I arrogantly thought that I needed to save you from the many so-called dysfunctional behaviors that I saw when I was a nursing student at the VA. But truth be told, you ended up saving me. Without you, I would have remained an isolated elitist, striving for comfort and security. You rescued me from the anemic life I could have led. Death is a sacred time, and it's sacred because the soul is close to the surface, almost tangible at times. Death humbles us. It strips us of our arrogance. One of you combat vets told me, now while I'm dying is not a time for me to be lying to myself. I had laughed with your wisdom. Indeed, the truth of the soul becomes more accessible when denials and facades crumble. What you and the other 9,999 dying veterans taught me is that the soul is the repository of truth. It has the capacity to hold truth, including the pain, the shame, and the trauma that we carry. You taught me that the soul is not afraid of pain and shame, and so it has no need to cover it up with denials or platitudes or numbing agents. Many of you veterans spent years, sometimes decades, lost in alcohol or drugs or workaholism to numb the pain and shame you held from the trauma you had experienced in the military. And many of you, at some point, laid down your favorite numbing agents. You reconnected with the part of self holding your pain and shame. You reconnected with your soul. You know, the soul speaks a different language. Some of you wrote or painted about your suffering. Some of you sang or danced your suffering. Many of you had colorful, metaphorical language to express your suffering. They cuss a lot, but anyway. But most of you simply used your wartime experience to quietly seek peace in your own way and to bring peace to those around you. It always seems so paradoxical that I would learn so much about peace from people who had been trained for war. There were many of you who remained hostile or bitter or violent or addicted. Some of you were even dying because of the consequences of those behaviors. Yet as death approached, most of you yielded to the secrets your soul revealed. And as you did, I watched and listened and learned some truths that can only be taught by the dying. And when I peeled back the layers of what your regrets revealed in one way or the other, it was this: stop the denied, stop the numbing, reconnect with the part of yourself that's holding your pain and shame. Don't waste your suffering. Learn from it. Use it as the passport into your inner freedom, and you will discover the power of your soul. On your deathbed, nothing else will really matter.
We thank you for that. You know, Deborah, when I think of hope, you are the definition of hope. And another good old military acronym, HOPE, means hearing other people's experiences. And for those of us who sit in this space as end-of-life professionals, who sometimes feel heavy in the heart, you give us hope that even if we touch one life, one family, we can count it as good, as success. And you blazing the trails has allowed us to continue to do the work that you set forth 30 years ago. On behalf of Psych Armor, on behalf of this nation, we thank you for all that you've done and all that you will continue to do, because to tell everyone that's in this space, Deborah and I have agreed that we are joining forces moving forward, because we cannot do this work alone. We cannot do it in silos. And if we want to set an example of what this looks like for communities and collaborations and partnerships that are going to do more than say thank you for your service, it starts with us. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of us in the upcoming years. But Deborah, what a blessing it's been to have you today. On your screens, everyone, you know, I have to say it, this session was specifically designed to touch your soul. The heart work, not just the head work of what you do, but your heart and your soul. And if you think we were pretty spot on with doing that, I think there's going to be a QR code with a few questions just for a quick, brief post-survey questionnaire, because we're able to do what we do because our audience shapes the work. You tell us which ways you want this to go. So with that being said, Emma, I know you're in the background. If you can so make sure that those post questions get to all of our participants, would greatly appreciate it. If you were with us today, thank you so much. If you are seeing this recording in the future, thank you so much. Our hope is that just like a pebble, you throw it in that water and you create ripple effects that will impact the way we care for our veterans through the end of life. Thank you.